home around 6:20 or 6:30. So like it took me like 3 hours to get home. It was ridiculous.
It's supposed to be the worst snow up there ever.
Well, I don't know about ever, but yeah, it's
Okay.
not fun. Let me just open I'm gonna open the tab. If for some reason it stalls, because I have like a bunch of tabs open, so if it stalls, I might have to force close the internet and then reboot.
No problem.
So if that happens, just say some stuff while I'm gone, just to kind of entertain people.
We'll have Allison play the fiddle.
No, the oud.
The oud now.
Dude.
The oud, dude. That's you, Allison, the oud dude.
Ha! I'm not the dude, man. Don't do that.
The oud dudette.
Okay, that's better.
Okay.
Just about ready. Who else did you say we're waiting on?
I got 3 more people that are supposed to come.
Okay, if they don't, then the recording.
Yeah, that's right.
The reason I put this hat on is I like these headphones, but they hurt my ears. Like,
yeah,
it like just really sore.
Absolutely, that's an awesome idea, Onie. I never thought of that.
Yeah,
no, it's a good idea.
I tend to have good ideas from time to time. Before I start, I just want to say, Donald, I was having a heated discussion earlier today, and someone said something along the lines of, I never changed my belief based on evidence. I don't really listen to any evidence unless, I don't change my beliefs unless I decide to, which just seemed like a really dumb comment, because from my perspective, everyone is like that. So why do any of us believe anything we believe? We believe it because we did some research and we came to the conclusion, to the best of our understanding, and we're wrong on some of what we believe, but we're not going to change our beliefs until we see compelling evidence for us. Like, some evidence might be compelling for other people. Other evidence might not be that evidence might not be compelling for different people. It all depends on what their standard is. But in the whole debating thing, I'm just trying to argue for what I believe, based on what I've seen. I'm not trying necessarily to win a debate. I always encourage challenging what I say. I don't want people to believe it just because I tell people. That's something I always try to encourage. But I think I am like most people in that I think I'm right on what I believe, because I wouldn't believe it if I thought I was wrong. So I think that's how everyone is.
All right, I have a question.
Sure.
I'm going to put something on here just see if you can hear it.
All right.
Okay. Can you hear that? Did you hear piano music playing?
No.
I heard the faintest little thing. It didn't really sound like piano, but I heard a noise of some sort.
Let me do it one more time, because I'm working on something else while I'm listening. If you didn't hear that, then I'm good.
Yeah, no, I didn't hear that. And if any of that piano stuff gets into the video, it'd be a nice soundtrack for the video.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Grace notes.
As long as it's not like anything inappropriate,
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we'll get started. You want to start the thing?
Sure, it started. You really look like an alien tonight, or I don't know, maybe a Russian guy.
Illegal alien, right?
Yeah.
So
let me introduce to you the one and only actress here, Ounieu Carlson.
Hello, everybody.
Jubilees.
Yes, we haven't done Jubilees in a while. Just things came up for me, and also, there was the Sukkot event. So, but I heard that you guys wanted me to continue with the Jubilee series.
Yes.
In the past, when I've done studies on certain books, I often don't finish. Like, I go through a lot of it, but I don't end up going through the whole thing. This one might be one of the first ones we finish together. If you guys keep wanting it, we'll just keep going through it. I believe we left off with when Abraham sacrificed his son, or was imminently about to sacrifice his son, and we kind of talked a little bit about the whole circumcision thing. So we're going to kind of pick off from there today, and my hope is that I think we should be able to get to the end of Abraham's life. We're probably not going to get into the whole Jacob story much, I think. Can I do a recap, of the whole thing that we've done so far? Allison's asking if I could do a recap.
Can you just do a brief rundown, because there's been a gap to catch people up if they're just starting in to listen to this again? Just the high points maybe, and say this is where we are now, but this, and this. If that's too much, it's fine. I understand.
For Jubilees,
probably not.
From now, from the beginning that we started till now, or just last time?
Probably from last time to this, because I think there's enough there for everyone to listen to, but they might want a little intro into this one. Sorry.
Okay. Well, so I don't exactly remember the content of everything we did in the last video, but I just know that we ended on that major note of the whole concept of the covenant of circumcision, and we also touched upon the 10 trials of that Abraham went through, and how the rabbis actually have that same tradition, which is found in Jubilees, that Abraham was tested by 10 trials, and he passed each trial. So we discussed kind of what those trials were, and I also briefly alluded to something that we're probably going to discuss today, and that's the whole thing with Abraham's bosom. So I'll probably mention that again, but so that's the best I can do without really looking over the video again to give like a brief overview. But so let me just get to the chapter. Let's see. I think. Oh yeah, and we also talked about mastema, which is, I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but mastema as a Hebrew name or Hebrew word, I think it means, they translate it as hostility or hostile one. And this is actually related to the word for Satan in Hebrew. Satan and mastema come from the same root. So you have Satan, the root is Sat, S-A-T, or whatever middle vowel you're going to put in there. And that same root, S-T, is in mastema, but mastema has the prefix mem, that's where you have the ma, and then it has the suffix, the m, also. So it has the prefix and suffix mem on each end of it. So it's like the basic root of Satan is in this word. So that's kind of interesting. And we touched on how mastema is like, in some ways he's good, but in other ways he's bad. He started out bad, and then he was chosen for a role, and he is basically the prince of demons, and he has that role to test people. So we touched upon that a little bit, but that's a huge theme that you'll see in other scriptures, like the homilies of Clement, recognition of Clement in the Nazarene Acts. There, it has that concept of Satan being a servant of Elohim to punish people and to test them. So. Now, sorry, I'm just getting right back.
Is that Hebrew?
Say it again.
Mastama.
Yeah, that's in Hebrew. That's
Hebrew. Okay.
Jubilees was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it was found in Hebrew. And the Mastema is a Hebrew word. I'm sure. I mean, I'm not sure, but it probably has a Aramaic cognate.
Yeah.
It probably occurs in Aramaic as well, so some similar form. Let's see here. So, okay, so now this is interesting. I want to start off here. So after Abraham does the sacrifice, or the almost sacrifice of Isaac, we see that right after this, he goes and keeps a feast for 7 days. Now, Jubilees tells us that this all occurred during the first month. So does anyone know what 7-day festival occurs in the first month? Well, we know it's the 7 days of unleavened bread. It doesn't specify unleavened bread in this festival that Abraham's doing. What we see in Jubilees sometimes is that certain festivals originate with patriarchs, but not all the customs originate at the time. So some of the customs might have come later, like unleavened bread, for example. But the 7 days of festival, like rejoicing or a holy time, that originated, according to Jubilees, with Abraham. And Jubilees, as I discussed before, has this overarching theme of the origin of the law. This commandment was first commanded at this time, and it points us to when it all came about. The Torah, as Jubilees tells us, is gradual. It comes into, each law becomes binding and relevant at different points of time. And so with 7 days of unleavened bread originated with Abraham, as we see here. And Jubilees tells us that because Abraham celebrated this festival, it was ordained that Israel and the seed of Israel should ordain it. So it's very much connected with Abraham. Israel is basically the ultimate fulfillment of Abraham's covenant. So, and that is why Israel is to keep all the holy days that Abraham originated. And what's very cool is that in a lot of these holy days that originate, they coincide with a covenant that was made with a patriarch, either Abraham or Jacob. So we see when covenants are made, that is commemorated by a festival. And that is essentially the origin of the festival days. They are commemorating significant events that deserve to be commemorated, and especially in regards to the covenant of Abraham and its fulfillment through Israel, because Israel is like the ultimate fulfillment of everything that was specified for Abraham. So that's why we see that originally it came from Abraham and for his family, but it was transferred to Israel specifically due to Israel being sanctified. Abraham and his family was sanctified, but when Israel came about, then Israel became the holy line. Now, Jubilees tells us that in chapter 19, we're chapter 19 right now, it tells us that the angels actually tested him. It was the angels who tested him to see if he was patient with Sarah when he was trying to bury her. And basically the implication is that Abraham did the right thing. Instead of trying to force it to be, force them to allow him to bury Sarah there, he's trying to do it the proper way. And Genesis kind of presents it as like this was a very noble thing he did, but Jubilees kind of presents it as this was a very righteous thing, because if he didn't do this, it would have indicated some lack of righteousness on his part. Now, so let me mention this for a second. There are certain things, scribal things, which to me have marks of additions by scribes from later times. And one of the examples here, we see, it says in verse 5 of chapter 19, and they gave him the land of the double cave over against Mamre, that is Hebron, for 400 pieces of silver. So it gives that like clarification, that is Hebron. And that just seems like, I don't see why an angel would tell Moses this. It makes more sense that a later scribe is saying, okay, let's tell people that this is Hebron so they get the connection. Because later people might not have been familiar with the geography. So that for me, that is plausible. And there's a lot of instances like that throughout Scripture of changes, small changes which don't really, they're not a big deal, but they very much seem to have the mark of a scribal addition. And for those who are new, I'm not sure if anyone here is new to my teachings, but for the recording that will be on YouTube, I'm sure there will be people who listen to it who've never encountered my teachings before. And something to keep in mind is that I am of the position of a radical sort that the scriptures are very much corrupted. Not to a point that the scriptures are unreliable, but there have been a lot of changes. So don't be surprised when I say things like how there's a lot of additions in the scriptures. And we've talked about this before with Jackson's group, especially with the Nazarene Acts. It has touched a lot upon how there are errors, corruptions, falsehoods in the scriptures. Anyways, I'll continue because that's a tangent. Sorry, I just want to read a second here. Okay. So another interesting thing, I mean, this is found in Genesis as well, but I just love this because it's so foreign, and most people skip over this and don't really think about it. But it basically says that Abraham had a third woman, and he married a woman named Keturah, and he had a whole family with Keturah. This was after Sarah died. So he had 6 sons from Keturah. And it's just amazing to think about. He had a whole other family. Like, imagine when you're 90 years old and then you start over and have a new family. Like, that's crazy. Now, Jubilees gives us a detail that's very cool. It tells us that who Keturah was from. It says Keturah was among the daughters of his household servants. I don't think Genesis tells us that. Hold on a sec. I just need to blow my nose for a sec. I'm sorry. My nose is stuffy. Yeah, as I said earlier, I was outside for a lot, trying to get home from work today. So also this passage tells us, verse 11 of chapter 19, it tells us that it says, Abraham took to himself a third wife, and her name was Keturah, because Hagar had died before Sarah. The implication here is that Abraham would have married Hagar if she was still alive. But she wasn't, so he married someone else. And there are people who teach that Abraham had all three women at the same time as wives. That he had Sarah, Hagar, and Keturah all at the same time. Jubilees refutes that. And as we know, the Dead Sea Scrolls has a very much anti-polygamy perspective in general. Well, Jubilees has certain things as well that kind of fits in with that anti-polygamy perspective. So, Abraham, now another thing is, a concubine is not the same as a wife. And furthermore, Hebrew doesn't really have a word for wife. It has a word, there's two different words that are used occasionally in the Hebrew. One is Isha, which just means woman. And another one, I think it's like Beulah or something. And it basically means lorded over. Someone who is, because the person is the husband is the lord of the house, head of the house. And the wife is not the head of the house. She's underneath him. So she is considered lorded over. And that's according to the Hebrew. So those are the two words. So when it says in Jubilees, Abraham took to himself a third wife, it actually, in the Hebrew, would say, took to himself a third woman. And then there's a place in Chronicles, I believe it is, Book of Chronicles, which says that Abraham had more than one concubine. I believe this is a misunderstanding. He did have more than one concubine, but I think the word concubine itself is a misunderstanding in the Hebrew again. So we associate with concubine as like a secondary wife. A lot of people would render that. But from what I've seen in my studies, a concubine is actually a replacement, a substitute. In the context of, like, for example, with Hagar, she was a substitute spouse temporarily so that he could have a child through her. However, in the case of Keturah, I actually think Keturah was a substitute, not a temporary one, but a permanent one. So he was married to Sarah. Sarah died. He needed to replace her with a new wife. He didn't need to, but he wanted to. And he decided to replace her or substitute her with a new wife, Keturah. So Keturah was a concubine in that sense, but was not a concubine in the secondary sense. She was a full wife, according to Jubilees. Let's see. Then another interesting detail we see, it's not in Genesis, is when Jacob and Esau are born, it tells us that Jacob learned to write, but Esau did not learn, for he was a man of the field and a hunter, and he learned war, and all his deeds were fierce. So what we see here is Jacob is valued as the better person for not being focused on the physical aspects, the physical labor, and he focuses on the philosophical, the intellectual, the spiritual. Now you can't. Both are not like, obviously they're not mutually exclusive. You can be an intellectual and you can do physical labor. But in general, you kind of have to have one as your primary and another as your secondary. So Jacob's primary was intellectual, but he also had some physical aspect of his work. Whereas Esau, Jubilees says, did not want to learn. He was not really interested in education. He preferred physical labor. And the implication is that because of Esau not learning this stuff, because of that, Esau was a wicked man. It doesn't mean that if you don't know how to write, you're wicked and that it's a sin, but what it means is that if you don't have the guidance of intellectual pursuit, you are more likely to do base actions. Like you're more likely to act like an animal. You're more likely to just get angry and lash out at people, and more likely to be confrontational in a physical manner. Whereas when you read certain things, it can calm you down, give you advice, and just make you a more patient person in general. And it also portrays his deeds as fierce, and that he was a hunter and that he learned war. These are not things that are necessarily bad, but in the way it emphasizes it for Esau, it seems like he was excessively that. Like he was too eager for war, too eager for hunting, too fierce. That's kind of how it seems to me. Now, I want to backtrack on one little thing. This is something important to keep in mind. Like, there are a lot of people who would look down on people like older men in their 60s or 70s who remarry a younger woman, and they say that that's just not right, or that just seems wrong. But we kind of see a sanction or an approval from Jubilees and Genesis. It tells us that it is okay. It's fine. Some people can't be alone when they're in their old age. They need a partner. It's very hard. And what does Genesis tell us? That
amen to that, brother.
Woman was made to be the helper. So, it's a partnership. I don't mean that woman's only purpose is to serve men, but I mean the marriage concept was created in a way to complement each other, where the woman helps the man, and if the man doesn't have a woman to help him, he's helpless. So women are very important to have, and Abraham understood that, and that's why he wanted another wife, and maybe he wanted more kids. It's wonderful to have kids, and he was overcome with grief. Imagine just being very much in grief. So I can definitely see why it'd be nice to have a family. And I also know that having a family can keep you going. Like, if you have a family you have to take care of, that's responsibility, extra responsibilities. It can keep you going. So anyways, we'll go on now. Now, here's an interesting hold on. Daniel, you asked, why is it an issue now? Many people are alone, especially men. Can you clarify that? You're saying why is it a bad thing?
Well, no. What you're seeing, the description of the family, it's an awesome description and an awesome structure for the family. But if you notice today in a society, you see a lot of people. If you'll read the newspaper, sometimes you'll hear about these incidents where older people are dying alone, and they don't know about that person even dying for days, even months sometimes. So my question was, why is that such a? Why are we seeing such an uptake on that?
I think it has to do with like the modernization of technology. Oh man, my head. Sorry, I didn't realize the camera was way high up like that. Sorry. But I think it has to do with like the technology, like being so isolating, like social media and all that stuff, internet. It just makes people more distant from each other. Not that those things are bad. It's just that it's an unintended consequence of it, and in general, like the older you get, the fewer people in your life that you have anymore. And really, the fact is, family is all you have. Like in the end of it, I find that family tends to be the only people left. Sometimes you can have a really good friend that stays with you for your whole life. But in my experience, friendships come and go, or you have a really good friend and they die. It's very hard to have friends there for you when you need them. So family, on the other hand, if you have kids, it just really helps. If you have a good relationship with your kids, they're there for you. Someone will take care of you. So that's really nice. But a lot of people don't have that because there's not a lot of stability. Like family stability has declined in modern times with divorce rates skyrocketing and family values being attacked in various ways, like through the whole homosexuality stuff and everything. It has weakened the whole family structure in my view. So we'll get back to Jubilees now. This is really cool. It's not specified in Genesis. It tells us that Abraham loved Jacob, verse 15, but Isaac loved Esau. And then in verse 16 it says, and Abraham saw the deeds of Esau, and he knew that in Jacob should his name and seed be called. And he called Rebekah and gave commandment regarding Jacob, for he knew that she loved Jacob much more than Esau. So that's kind of funny. Like it says, Abraham loved Jacob, but it says Rebekah loved Jacob much more than Esau. Now, one thing that I strongly disagree with, that a lot of people will say, is that you can't have favorites. If you have kids, you're not supposed to have favorites. I've never understood that. When Scripture says don't show favoritism, that's not what it means. Like, favoritism means, like, don't treat people differently because you like them. Like, that's what it means. It doesn't mean you can't have a favorite of something. But by definition, if something is better than something else, then that should be your favorite. It doesn't mean that you don't love them, but it means, like, let's say you have a son that hates you, that hates your guts, and curses you every day and wants nothing to do with you. Then you have a son that loves you very much and is like your best friend. Well, it makes sense that you're going to love your one son more than the other. And it's just kind of funny because people don't want to say that because they feel like that's offensive to say that, oh, if you say that you love one son more than the other or one child more than the other, then that makes you a bad person. And again, I don't think that's the case. And I think that's very damaging to morality to suggest that. Because, for example, there's a common theme, claim with God, or it should be Elohim, and all of us. Like, the basic idea is that no one is better than anyone else because we're all sinners, we're all evil, despicable. You know, that's what Christians will say. Many Christians will say that. They say we are totally depraved and things like that. That no one is better than the other, and that they take what James says. When James says, he says, if you have broken one part of the law, you've broken the entire law. Which is not what James is trying to say, but that's how people understand him. They say that if you break even one law, it's the same as you've done any bad thing. So if someone steals something, they're just as bad as a murderer. That's how people interpret that, which is silly. But so along those lines, they say Elohim does not have a favorite. Like, he doesn't think one person's more righteous than the other, and it's just ridiculous. We know for a fact that he values people based on how righteous they are and how faithful they are. So the more righteous, the more faithful you are, the more he loves you. That's just how it is. So also, we see Genesis tells us that Rebecca, like, it tells us Rebecca did certain things, but it doesn't tell us that it was okay, that it was a good thing. So it almost gives some people the impression that Rebecca was going against Isaac in a sinful way. She wasn't following what Isaac said. She was doing her own thing. Jubilees, however, supports Rebecca and goes against Isaac. Jubilees tells us not that Isaac was sinning, but that Isaac was basically blinded by his own desires for his family. He didn't understand. He blinded by his ignorance. That's the best way to put it. His innocent ignorance. Whereas Abraham and Rebekah, they could see clearly. They didn't have the bias that Isaac had. And they could see that Esau was, in general, a not a good person. Isaac, we are told later, loved his son because he was his firstborn. And, you know, when you have your first child, you love that child, like, in a very special way. No one can take away the feeling you have for your first child. It's just something very special. So that's why Isaac loved Esau so much. But what we see is that Abraham commanded Rebekah about Jacob. So Rebekah was actually not taking it up on her own initiative, but she was following the commandment of Abraham. She was doing what Abraham told her. So that is important to emphasize, because some people think, like, when Rebekah did all that stuff to help Jacob, that she was being bad, but not according to Jubilees. Now, verse 17 says, Jacob will be the glory of the whole seed of Shem, which is interesting that it specifies Shem specifically. You know, why the seed of Shem? Well, I think it's related to the whole Semitic, you know, the Semitic peoples, because all, like for Arabs and others, are Semitic. They're from Shem's line. So Israel is for the glory of all the seed of Shem, according to Jubilees. That's what Abraham told Rebekah. And okay, let's see. And this is interesting. It says, verse 21, Abraham says, let thy heart rejoice in thy son Jacob, for I have loved him far beyond all my sons. Which is a very powerful thing to say. It basically sounds like he's saying that he loves Jacob more than Isaac, and more than any of his sons or descendants, which is a pretty strong thing to say, that you love your grandson more than your son. I don't think it's because, like, I don't think Isaac and Abraham had a bad relationship. I just think covenants were made with Abraham and covenants were made with Jacob. Isaac is sort of the in-between. He's kind of the transition between Abraham to Israel. Isaac's important, but compared to Abraham and Jacob, Isaac is much less significant. And as far as I know, according to the scriptures, there's no evidence that Isaac ever wrote a book. Like, the Genesis Apocryphon. It has a book of Noah, has a book of Lamech, a book of Noah, book of Abraham. Jubilees tells us it's a book of Jacob. But Jubilees never tells us that Isaac wrote a book. And so far, I have not seen any evidence that there was an Isaac book. And it would be very hard for there to be an Isaac book and a Jacob book, because hard in the sense that it would overlap so much. There wouldn't be a lot of fresh material for Isaac to cover. There's just not much information in the story of Isaac compared to that of Abraham and Jacob. Like, Jacob's story begins when Abraham's story ends, essentially. Abraham dies and Jacob's a young child. So Isaac's story is kind of subsumed into both Abraham's story and Jacob's. Now, Isaac probably wrote like a testament. Each of the patriarchs probably gave a last testament. But in terms of an actual whole book, it doesn't seem like Isaac did. And so, yeah, that's just amazing that apparently Abraham loved Jacob more than Isaac, his own son. And then it says, in verse 24, and in his seed shall my name be blessed, and the name of my fathers, Shem and Noah and Enoch and Mahalalel and Enosh and Seth and Adam. And these shall serve to lay the foundations of the heaven, and to strengthen the earth, and to renew all the luminaries which are in the firmament. Now, something is strange here. For some reason, Abraham does not list all the fathers from Shem to Adam. So here's how it goes from Adam to Shem. It goes Adam, Seth, Enos, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Lamech, Noah, Shem. What names does Abraham not mention in his list of the fathers? He doesn't mention Canaan. He doesn't mention Jared. He doesn't mention Lamech. And and also Methuselah. He does not mention Methuselah. So Methuselah, Jared, Lamech, and Canaan are not mentioned. It says in that following verse that those men specifically were the foundations. They served to lay the foundations of the heaven and to strengthen the earth, and to renew all the luminaries. So, well, in the seed of those. Excuse me. Hold on a second. No, okay, so it looks like it's saying in his seed, Jacob's seed will lay the foundations of the heaven and strengthen the earth and renew all the luminaries. So I misinterpreted that. But so I have read commentary before, like R.H. Charles gives footnotes and Vanderkam sometimes gives footnotes, and they ask in the footnotes, why are not all the fathers from Adam to Shem named? Well, what I discovered is that 3 of the fathers all died in the year of the flood, according to the Samaritan Torah, and so that could be significant. The fact that all 3 died in the flood, in the year of the flood. Lamech, Methuselah, and Jared, all according to the Samaritan version of the Book of Genesis. They all died in the year of the flood. That just leaves Canaan, but Canaan is, if I understand correctly, I think that Hebrew word is connected with Cain, like the same root. So perhaps the similarity of the name of Cain is why Abraham doesn't mention the name of Canaan. I don't know for certain, but that's just speculation. But it is interesting to look at some of those details and see, I wonder why. Another possibility is that scribes removed those names for some reason. Or maybe they removed Canaan accidentally, but the other three were removed for the reason I mentioned, because they died in the year of the flood, so they weren't mentioned. So there's a couple possibilities there. And then after he tells Rebekah to love Jacob and make sure he receives what belongs to him, he then calls Jacob before the eyes of Rebekah, his mother, and blesses him. And says, Jacob, my beloved son, whom my soul loveth, may God bless thee from above the firmament, and may he give thee all the blessings wherewith he blessed Adam, Enoch, Noah, and Shem, and all the things of which he told me, and all the things which he promised to give me. May he cause to cleave to thee and to thy seed forever, according to the days of heaven above the earth. And the spirits of Mestima shall not rule over thee or over thy seed, to turn thee from the Lord, who is thy God from henceforth forever. May the Lord God be a father to thee, and now the firstborn son, and to the people always. So, imagine you're a young kid, and your grandpa says, yeah, you're the best, and you're going to get everything. These things, Abraham was sowing these things into Jacob's mind at an early young age. He was basically reinforcing the understanding that Jacob was going to be better than Esau. So that's an important context to understand the family dynamic here. And in this instance, when he's talking to his grandson Jacob, he only mentions the names Adam, Enoch, Noah, and Shem. And those are because those men are the most significant of the line. Adam, since he was the first of all. Enoch, he walked with Elohim, and he was and Noah walked with Elohim. And then Shem, he is the holy line. Jubilees tells us that Shem was to be the holy line, that the promised land was given to Shem and Shem's descendants. And Genesis Apocryphon confirms that as well. And as I mentioned in previous teachings, Genesis Apocryphon is like the brother of Jubilees, or the cousin. They're closely connected, and it's amazing how much it connects with Jubilees. There's so many details found in Jubilees which are elsewhere only in Genesis Apocryphon. It kind of, if Jubilees is legit, Genesis Apocryphon must be legit. If Genesis Apocryphon is legit, Jubilees must be legit. They go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. Okay. Then, sorry about the
question. Can I?
Yeah.
Did you at one time equate the Genesis Apocryphon with the Book of Lamech?
You said with the Book of Lamech?
You gave it another name. Instead of the Apocryphon, you called it...
well, scholars called it the Apocalypse of Lamech before they unraveled the whole thing, because they took fragments off the top and saw it talking about Lamech. They assumed the whole scroll was about Lamech, and then once they opened it, they realized, oh no, it's not. So they renamed it Genesis Apocryphon.
So that's the old name.
Yeah, Lamech Apocalypse is the old name, and Genesis Apocryphon is the new name. Donald says grandkids are the best, much easier. Looks like we've got someone who likes his grandkids more than his kids. Uh-oh. Don't tell your kids that. So
I'm not sure I like any of them much.
So then it says that Abraham called Ishmael and his 12 sons, so Ishmael's 12 sons, and Isaac and his 2 sons, and the 6 sons of Keturah and their sons. Imagine that gathering. Ishmael and his sons, Isaac and his sons, and the sons of Keturah, all together. And that is pretty impressive. Like, he's keeping in touch with all his family. And so it looks like Abraham he had 20 grandchildren. Pretty amazing. At least that we know of. 20 sons, grandchildren that are males, but maybe he had daughters. And we know that Scripture doesn't mention daughters as often. So as far as we know, Abraham could have had like tons of daughters, and we don't even know. No, it's not the dog in the background is not because of the sirens. It's because people are moving around inside, like, and whenever my mom comes home, she freaks out and like goes crazy. So that's probably what it was. So yeah, 20 grandsons, not including granddaughters, how many he ever had. Maybe he didn't have any, but it is seem a little bit strange that he wouldn't have any granddaughters. Well, he commanded the sons of Ishmael and the sons of Keturah and the sons of Isaac that they should observe the way of the Lord, they should work righteousness and love each his neighbor, and act on this manner amongst all men, that they should each so walk with regard to them as to do judgment and righteousness on the earth, that they should circumcise their sons according to the covenant which he had made with them, and not deviate to the right hand or to the left of all the paths which the Lord had commanded us. Hold on, wait a minute. Us? I thought this was third person. Then all of a sudden it transitions to first person. Well, again, this is a scribal error. We see the same scribal error in the book of Enoch, where Enoch is talking, and then all of a sudden Noah is talking. There's no transition. There's all kinds of things like that. So we have that in Jubilees here, where the angels are telling us that Abraham was telling his children commands, and then in the middle of Jubilees telling us that he's doing this, all of a sudden Abraham is talking in the first person. So somewhere there's a quotation that starts, I think it actually starts where it says that they should observe the way of the Lord in verse 2. I think that's where the quotations start, and so that it should be in first person, not in the third person. And then it says, okay, so we should keep for ourselves from all fornication and uncleanness, and renounce from amongst us all fornication and uncleanness. And if any woman or maid commit fornication amongst you, burn her with fire, and let them not commit fornication with her after their eyes and their heart. And let them not take to themselves wives for the seed of Canaan will be rooted out of the land. Now, I want to stop there for a sec. So what I discovered in my research before is that the Acts Council, chapter 15, seems to be a throwback to this chapter of Jubilees. Jubilees is telling us that he's giving commandments. Abraham is giving commandments to his children, and the commandments are to abstain from uncleanness and fornication, and I thought it also said blood. Like, do not shed blood or something. Or maybe that's earlier in Jubilees. But anyway, It's either this chapter or an earlier chapter. There appears to be a definite connection between Acts chapter 15 and the requirements that are being given. So I think that needs to be investigated further, because that could potentially help explain what Acts chapter 15 is talking about. And then it says, okay, so one interesting detail is here Abraham tells us that if any woman or a young woman commits fornication, she is to be burned with fire. Now, when it says fornication, I think it's talking about whoring. I don't think it's talking about having sex before marriage, because the Torah tells us that if a woman is seduced by a man, they simply are to marry. The man is to take her as his wife and not divorce her all his days. But he has to have the father's permission still. So that's if you have sex before marriage. So when it says fornication, I think it's really talking about like whoring, prostitution. And in Leviticus, it tells us that if a daughter of a priest prostitutes herself, she is to be burned with fire. That's in Leviticus, but it doesn't say anything about a regular woman doing that. But Abraham tells us the truth, that is the case. That we got to ask, why is that? Why by fire? Well, the Torah tells us that each crime is an eye for an eye. And the punishment is related to what was being done. So certain crimes were to be stoned, to have a punishment of stoned to death, because those crimes were very hard-hearted, as hard as stone. And then these ones, like the sexual crimes, in particular adultery and prostitution, those are crimes of passion, of fire in the heart. So it would make sense, very fitting, that fire is to be the means of punishment. And then you have what Jubilees tells us, that if any man is, with the instrument that you harm someone else, with that same instrument, you should be harmed to the same degree. So it's an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. If you kill someone with a sword, you should be killed with a sword. If you kill someone with a gun, you should be killed with a gun. That's the way Jubilee system works. It's pretty harsh, but that's a very fair way to do it. If you take someone's eye out, how is that fair for you not to be punished at all? You should suffer that same fate. Your eye should be removed, according to Jubilees in the Torah. Now, there is a rabbinic thing that occurs where the rabbis basically try to undermine this law of an eye for an eye. And they basically say, well, that means a monetary payment. If you cut someone's eye out, you need to pay money, and that's your punishment, which doesn't make sense. How is that eye for an eye? It's not. They base that idea off of one part of the Torah, which says if a slave's eye is cut out, then you shall set him free. They argue, well, that's evidence that it's a monetary thing. Well, that's for a slave, and we know, like from the Code of Hammurabi, that slaves did not have as many rights in that time. And I mentioned Code of Hammurabi because a lot of the laws in that, as well as other law books of that time from other cultures, they have similar laws and similar values in general. Not exact. The Bible laws, I think, are much better than these other cultures, but they have similar concepts. And the concept that we see throughout all cultures in that time, and heavily in the scriptures, is that slaves have less rights. And if a slave dies on the job, as long as the slave owner wasn't horribly responsible for it, then the punishment is to be monetary rather than eye for an eye. So, anyways, all that to say, Jubilees gives us that extra detail that we don't see anywhere else, that this law is for prostitution in general, not just for prostitution of priest daughters, but for any prostitute. She's to be burned. And okay. And then it says, Abraham told them the judgment of the giants and the judgment of the Sodomites, how they had been judged on account of their wickedness.
Hey, Onya, let me ask you this question. I think this is a good one. And what you just read, is that the statute that Judah used when they, remember when Tamar, they found Tamar to be pregnant, and he said, let her be brought out and burned. Is that the statute that they used for Jubilees?
Yeah, that's the basic same thing. And some people have criticized Judas for saying that. But Jubilees portrays that as the right thing. And that is, it was the right thing, that only in the sense that that crime deserved it. But it was very wrong that Judah was being hypocritical because he slept with a prostitute. So, but once he realized that he was just as guilty, he couldn't do that. He couldn't punish Tamar. That would have not been righteous for him to do that. So, Sherry, I'm not sure I agree, but you want to share your perspective on that? You said Tamar was likely of priestly origin, not just parallel stories. If you want, you can share about that. Or if not, that's fine. Just let me know. Okay. Yeah, you could always talk with me about it some other time. So, but even if she was, let's just say along that line, she was of priestly origin. Here, Abraham says, if any woman or maid commit fornication amongst you, burn her with fire. So at least in this instance, it seems to be applying this this punishment across the board, and not just for daughters of priests. Now, we're told that Abraham told his grandchildren about the judgment of the giants and of the Sodomites and how they were condemned for what they did. And so this kind of reminds me of where in Genesis it says they were the heroes of old, of renown, or something along those lines. The giants. So it's like those are the people from long ago that we talked about.
Gibborim.
Yeah, the Gibborim.
Gibborim should be tyrants.
Okay. So it says, guard yourselves from all fornication and uncleanness and from all pollution of sin. Now this was commanded for all his grandchildren. So that includes the Arabs, the Arabic people, because Arabic people were descended from Ishmaelites and the children of Keturah. And it tells us that, the Torah gives laws of uncleanness, like kosher laws and don't touch certain things, or if you touch certain things, you have to purify yourself because you're unclean. Jubilees tells us guard yourself from uncleanness, and he's commanding that to all his grandchildren, not just to the Israelites. So this seems to be a law that's for Gentiles in general, or at least for Arabic people. And we see that the Arabs, They do have a law like that. Well, they don't keep kosher exactly, but they keep a lot of the kosher laws. They try to be pure. And I think they do circumcision as well, although I could be mistaken.
Ronnie, question.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the Samaritans versus the Israelites or the Judahites who went into Babylonian captivity, on who was who and who was what? That has a whole lot to do with Scripture and whose Scripture is right and succession of priesthood and all that stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, I think the Samaritan Torah is more accurate than the Masoretic Torah in general.
Me too.
But it's kind of unclear exactly where the Samaritan Torah originates. And I am of the view that the Samaritan group is not the legit line.
Why?
Why?
Wait.
Because so there's certain books which suggest that, which certain apocryphal books as well as the New Testament. But in general, there is a lineage. It's the sons of. Basically, it's the sons in that line of Levi.
Who wrote that and when, though?
Who wrote
that particular passage and when?
Oh, for the laws of lineage.
Yeah. What's the provenance?
I mean, it's found in the law of Moses in the 5 books. So it goes back very ancient.
Okay. All right. My question that I'm basing this off of is some commentary that I've read. If you bear with me for a minute. What they said was, in the Babylonian captivity, only the noble people, the people who were wealthy and possibly high up in the priesthood, got taken into captivity, and they were actually treated pretty well. But the people of the normal people, the people who were actually of the land and of the people, got scattered and burned out, but they were still there. Okay? Does this follow anything you've ever heard?
Yeah.
Okay. So they kept their Torah that they had, okay? The things that they knew from the country priests and whatnot, or however you want to say, non-city priest. I don't mean country, All right, so the people who came out of the Babylonian captivity rewrote what they had taken and burnt up and destroyed and all that stuff from their memory. Now, their memory is a different memory from what the people who were left in the land had, right? Do you follow that?
Yes.
Right. So you think that the people who are left in the land had a more proper translation or understanding than the people who came out of the Babylonian captivity? What do you think?
So it seems from what I can tell that all the copies were lost at that time, and then they were able to restore the copies. But along with what you were saying, in that idea that you suggested, I don't find it so plausible for the reason I think, like, the Samaritans have never been a fan of Jerusalem. And if I understand correctly, it says that the priests and the people were left to take care of Jerusalem, and they were left there. So I don't see how the priests would abandon Jerusalem. If the Samaritans were the legit ones, why would they then go away from Jerusalem?
I get that.
If they were still in the land the whole time.
I do understand that. But my main question is, well, maybe it's my misunderstanding. If there was a centralized priesthood that had one agenda, and then there was a countryside parish sort of with the people priesthood who had another understanding, and nobody could write except the scribes. That is the important point to understand here. No one really wrote unless you were of the upper class and learned how to write. and read and were a scribe. Everything else is the written word, right? So when you come back after captivity, you can write what you want. The people who had it by an oral tradition, who had stayed in the land forever, who were not taken as hostages and important people, might have a different story than the ones who were taken. That's just my premise, and it's something that I found in somebody's book somewhere, and I just wanted to see what everybody thought about that. I'm sorry, I'll shut up now.
I don't know that.
Yeah,
I don't know. See, here's the way I understand the Babylonian captivity. I understand the Babylonian captivity. There were 3 different waves that went out from Babylon. When they came when the Babylonian army came in, Jeremiah told them to go out and to surrender to Nebuchadnezzar. They did that, though, and the city was spared. That first wave of people that went out from Jerusalem at that time was people, the nobles, some of the top leadership. Among those was Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They went away in chains to Babylon. They set in place another government, and that government rebelled. Nebuchadnezzar had to come in there. They had to come in there again, okay? And then, of course, that's when they killed a lot of people from that second administration, okay? They really just killed everybody, and it was at this time that they burned the temple. The first time they took things out of there. The second time that Nebuchadnezzar had to go in there, they burned the thing down. Then there was a third entrance into Babylon, and that's when the captain of the guard went in there. And they cleaned some people out then. So I find it hard to believe that Nebuchadnezzar would have allowed, particularly after the second time, to allow everything except the bare necessities to be stripped. What do you think?
I think the priesthood pretty much ceased when there was no priestly stuff going on at the temple when there was the exile going on. The people that stayed there, they were allowed to take care of the fields, it says, but I don't think they were doing any of the other stuff. And certainly if it was the Samaritans taking care of the fields, they were not doing the Jerusalem temple.
There wasn't practicing any kind of religion at all. Because they were, especially after that second time that Nebuchadnezzar had to come in there, they burned the religious institution to the ground at that point. That's the way I understand it.
Right, and it seems to me to be, see, the other thing, Allison, is the Samaritans don't have any of the other prophets. So you kind of have to say, okay, so why are they not, what's their motivation for not accepting those prophets? And
I would think, depending on which group they lined up with after the return, I think that has a whole lot to do with everything. But that's, you're more of a scholar than I am. I was just asking your opinion. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hold on. Yeshua said that he would what is it? Something along the lines of bring to naught the knowledge of the wisdom of the wise, and those who are lessers or considered lessers would be given great wisdom. So I would say, don't just discount yourself by saying that I'm the scholar and you're not. So you know what I mean?
Yeah, thank you.
Everyone's a scholar,
no, I do. I thank you, and I'm just I will listen to you first. It's good. You have a whole lot more information than I do. I just have several commentaries that I've read, and I'm not as well read as you are. So thank you. And I just had an idea. Just thought. Thanks.
Yeah, sure thing. Oh no, who left? We have 10 participants, and it's now down to 9. That's okay. I'm going to be wrapping this up shortly, but I'll just say as a final, I do want to close on the Jubilees, but I will just say for the Samaritan, I think from what I see, I always try to approach things from a benefit of the doubt approach, and so least conspiratorial. I'm not a big conspiracy person. I always try to look at it from a perspective of how is it possible that everybody could be right or as right as possible, based on their opinion or perspective. So least amount of intentional lying or complete fabrication. I try to avoid those allegations as best as possible. So from what I see, the best way to explain it by being fair to all sides and giving everyone equal caution. The way I see it is that the Samaritans wanted to. I think there's a passage in Ezra and Nehemiah which says that the Samaritans wanted to help the Jews build the temple, in the second temple. They did not allow the Samaritans to do that. So it seems like they decided, okay, well, we'll build our own temple then. So they built a temple, and then somehow the Samaritan Torah came about in its form. Because as I've said before, I believe the temple scroll represents a closer form to the original, and the temple scroll gives laws for the temple and how to build it, whereas the Samaritan Torah does not have laws for that. So somehow I think the Samaritan Torah came into existence, and then generations later, the Samaritans only had the Samaritan Torah, and they had their temple, and there's a part in the Samaritan Torah which says that they are to build an altar on the mountain of blessing, Mount Gerizim. Even the Masoretic text says the Mount Gerizim is the mountain of blessing. So the Samaritans saw that, and they put two and two together and thought, okay, well, then if the mountain of blessing is Mount Gerizim, and that's where we have our temple, that's where our temple should be. Like that seems the line of reasoning they had there. And then the Samaritans are most certainly descended from the Israelites. The question is whether they are from the patrilineal line that Scripture says is required for the priestly line. And I've seen some documents which say that they were descended from the mother, the mother line instead of the father. So, in other words, some of Israelites' daughters married other men, and then those men converted to Israel religion, and they considered themselves Israelites, and then they had descendants, and they had descendants. But according to the Torah, their descendants are not in the Levitical line anymore, because once a woman marries another man, she leaves the house and enters into the house of her husband. So there's so much more about the Samaritan Torah. We'll have to talk about it another time. I appreciate you asking about it, and we
Thank
can
you.
have a discussion about it.
I really, I'm sorry guys, from past episodes of Ounieu talking, I kind of feel that And from some of the historical writers who have, or historians who have written, I think maybe perhaps Ounieu is right that, in a way, that the Samaritan might have a whole lot of importance.
The Samaritan Torah, you mean?
Yeah, might have a whole lot of importance that we don't give it. I think there's a whole lot of stuff there that we're just not seeing. And I agree with all the stuff I've always heard about. It that you have said. I don't understand it as well as I should. That's why I'm still in the iffy place. But thank you. Thanks.
Final thing on that, Samaritan Torah. Support for it briefly, not long at all. Septuagint, it has tons of agreements with the Septuagint. Has tons of agreements with copies of the Torah found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Has many agreements with the Book of Jubilees. And so those things together make strong indication that the Samaritan Torah is a more reliable version of the Torah than Masoretic text that we have of the Torah. So I'm going to wrap this up for Jubilees, and then if you guys have any questions, let me know. So I'm going to end with chapter 20 today. I was hoping to go a little farther. We got sidetracked, but that's okay. So we see that Abraham talks to his grandchildren and tells them not to worship idols and not to make idols for yourself. And then it says, work uprightness and righteousness before Elohim, serve him and worship him continually. Why? In order that he may have pleasure in you and grant you his mercy, and send rain upon you morning and evening, and bless all your works which ye have wrought upon the earth, and bless thy bread and thy water, and bless the fruit of thy womb, and the fruit of thy land, and the herds of thy cattle, and the flocks of thy sheep. And ye shall be a blessing on the earth, and all nations of the earth will desire you, and bless your sons in my name, that they may be blessed as I am. So there's a little bit to unpack there. So Abraham just told us, work uprightness and righteousness in order that God will give you mercy. Elohim will give you mercy. That flies straight in the face of what Christianity says, a lot of Christians say. They say, we're saved as Abraham was saved, by faith, not works, blah, blah, blah. But here we have Abraham saying, in order to receive mercy, first work righteousness, then you will receive mercy. In order that you will receive mercy, it says. So, along those lines, it also says, and you will be blessed with physical blessings. Good weather, and all your work will be blessed, and your animals and your land, and your food and stuff. So that connects with the Torah, which gives blessings for obedience of the law and curses for disobedience. This is a very important thing that is very relevant for our time. I think these laws of curses and blessings are forever binding. And so if people have problems, if they have illness, disease, sickness, all kinds of things, or if they're not successful in life for certain reasons, there's two reasons why that could be. Or maybe three or something. So these are the reasons. One, it's because of you that you were guilty of sin, and because of that, you are suffering. It's your fault. That's one. And we can't say that's the only reason, because we know with the whole thing with Job, right? So that's one. Number two is someone intentionally tried to harm you, and that's why you are suffering. Because someone could poison you or give you a disease intentionally because they're trying to hurt you. So that's the second reason. And then the third reason is complete accident, and that would be like a natural disaster where it's outside of your control. You just happen to be in a place where there's an earthquake or a hurricane or whatever, or a nuclear, a power plant exploding or whatever. So those are the ways that you could receive disease.
Can you recap that again? 1, 2, and 3, just to.
What do you mean 1, 2, and 3?
Can you say the 3 reasons again?
Oh, okay. So either because of your own actions, like basically because you sinned, or someone sinned against you, or an accident. Either you accidentally hurt yourself, or someone accidentally hurt you, or natural accident, where like a natural disaster happened.
Okay.
That's the only way you get illness or disease.
All right.
Accident or ignorance by you or someone else.
Got it.
Natural disaster, or you sinned or someone sinned against you.
Okay, thank you.
And that's an important principle that a lot of people don't care about, but it's very relevant because many people are in condemnation and they don't realize it. They're not really paying attention. If they pay attention, these are called signs. The Torah calls it signs. These diseases are signs that you have disobeyed the Torah. So as we all get older, I mean, I'm pretty young right now, but as we're all older, I mean, many of us only started keeping Torah recently, relatively speaking. So if you didn't keep Torah in your early life, well, then that might come to haunt you because, you know, actions have consequences. Even if you repent, unless you're healed by a miracle, you may still die or get disease from things you did way in the past that were against Torah. But it's best to start keeping Torah now, and the more you keep it, the healthier you'll be, and you will be blessed. You will not harm your health anymore. So just evaluate where you are in life, and if you're coming down with these illnesses, then that means you did something wrong, most likely, or someone, again, the 3 examples. But try to observe what type of things caused it. Like for example, if you have diabetes, it's pretty certain that it's because of something you did, either by accident, ignorance, or sin. It's not the other reasons, you know. So you gotta kind of look towards yourself and see, what did I do wrong, if anything, to cause it.
What about heredity?
So that would be an example of someone else, either they did something to their body that messed up their genetics themselves, and then they passed on their messed up genetics, or as I said, you know, an accident. So it's probably the case that certain genetic couplings result in complete accidents. Like I've heard of diseases which are like 1 in a million odds or something, like 1 in a million births come with this birth defect. But I will say this, I have a strong suspicion. Now, a lot of people would disagree with this, but I think it may have merit. It's something to consider. I don't have absolute proof this is the case, but I think it's very possible that a lot of birth defects and problems are caused during the pregnancy, especially like if you do unhealthy things during that time. And one of the things I think can cause it is sex during pregnancy. A lot of people say it doesn't harm the baby, but the Essenes spoke against it. They said it is not to be done. And I think there's a good case to be made that it is at least potentially harmful. Of course, at different stages, like in the 3rd trimester, it's probably the least harmful because they're the most developed. But I really think that the 1st and 2nd trimester are the most vulnerable for a fetus that are developing. So we know that according to the scripture, when a man and wife have sex, causes uncleanness that needs to be purified. I think that uncleanness, if it's in the woman's system, could then contaminate the fetus inside her and cause some illness at a very early stage. And when it's at an earlier stage, an illness could very easily lead to a birth defect. So we definitely have to be careful with that, I think. So that could explain some of the genetic stuff too, or hereditary things. And the final thing to note for this is that it says that Ishmael and his sons and the sons of Keturah and their sons went together and dwelt from Paran to the entering in of Babylon in all the land which is towards the east, facing the desert. And these mingled with each other, and their name was called Arabs and Ishmaelites. This is also an example of potentially a scribal addition. So either the angels are telling this to Moses, they mingled together and then they were called Arabs and Ishmaelites, or it was a scribal addition explaining that they became Arabs eventually. I'm kind of leaning more towards that this might be a scribal addition, because the term Arab came, I'm not sure it's that old as Jubilees claims to be, so, but it's unclear. So anyways, this is going to be where we end. But I want to give an opportunity for anyone to ask any questions about what we discussed. And if you have a burning question about something that we didn't discuss, you could always type it up, and I can see if I want to answer it. But I might not. If that's the case, you can always hit me up on Facebook, and we can discuss anything you want to discuss.
Hey, I thank you so much. This was awesome. Very in-depth, very detailed, and so well thought out. I thank you so much for coming on here and sharing all the stuff that most people would think is crazy, but all of us love. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
We only got 2 chapters today. That's very frustrating. Only in the sense, I'm not frustrated with anyone here, but I'm like, it's like, oh, I wish we could do more, but it's...
Oh, yeah. Nobody else understands. You have to pick your audience, and your audience is here.
It's going to be a little bit, like, we're gonna have like 20 or something Jubilees videos probably, so, or maybe even more.
Hey! That's awesome.
But I guess if people like it.
Oh, yeah. Look, if you have a legacy, then you have done your work, my man. You have fulfilled your calling. Leave something behind for others to watch and learn from, man.
That's what I'm trying to do. Thank you. So anyone have anything they want to say? If not, we'll end it here.
Yeah. Yes, on the chat, we're going to be having a Pentecost boot camp.
Oh, okay.
And that's June 6th through 10. It's on the Zadokite calendar. I put a link up, www.essene.faith for you. Details are there. And we have a Shabbat service every Shabbat at 11 o'clock. We have good attendance. You're welcome to come. And also we have our controversial forum at 1 o'clock on Shabbat. Now we'll add this Wednesday night again until we finish up. And I appreciate you all supporting the ministry and certainly for coming tonight. This information, well, you're not going to get it anyplace else. This is all. We've got this savant here. And he's doing good, and we've appreciated him for years, and I have a lot of his recordings, too, out at my place. So thank you for coming, and may you all be blessed.
Hey, Jackson, one question. What's that controversial thing you said on Sabbaths?
Controversial. I just call it controversial now. It's controversial topics. We started out using controversial scriptures, and they went to controversial topics, and they have been very controversial, but they've also been very orderly as well. And I guess we have probably about a dozen of those now or so that are posted. And you're more than welcome to come. It's a forum, so you can.
Is it like, so it's like not predetermined what it's going to be about?
Well, yes, there's a little bit of a topic. Last time we did comments on M. Scott Peck's, what's the name of that book? I forgot now.
Oh, shoot. It's, I've forgotten too, but it's about communal evil, and also the appearance of the serpent sort of creature and exorcism. It's in psychology. It's amazing.
Scott Peck he's a psychoanalyst. He's dead now, of course, but he came out with some revolutionary books proving that there was evil behind some of these mental problems. And so what he's written is very analytical, but this next time,
the collective evil.
Yeah, collective evil. We're going to look at the My Lai massacre.
Yes.
Old guy like me, you'll remember that. I think it was 67, 68, something like that. And it was in the papers for a long time, where we had some armed forces people in Vietnam that just went absolutely nuts and mowed down several villages. And this thing all happened like with your finger up. Yeah, it all happened like spontaneously. And so this week, Peck is going to analyze some of that shortly, and then we'll talk about it. It's going to be good. Last one was really good.
Yes, and the biggest thing is we did this once before. Sorry, Jackson. We did this once before back in like June or maybe July, and we talked about this collective evil thing, and it was powerful. It's how, look, you can fall into this very easily. You need to consciously not. You need to consciously resist. It is an amazing, amazing book and teaching, and it's going to be great, great thing for us to listen to and talk about, because we are here to ameliorate creation and do things that have never been done before. We need to listen to this, okay? Thank you. Sorry.
Thanks for sharing, Allison and Jackson. I appreciate it.
Sorry.
All right, Jackson, you want to close it out? Where did he go? Did he go to the bathroom, Jackson? You still alive, Jackson?
I've just been on mute. Yeah, I'm done.
Did you have a heart attack?
Not this time, but keep watching. It'll happen. Right before your eyes.
We want you here for the next 3 decades.
Okay, we'll be here. Thank you, brother. Love you, too.
Love you guys. Peace.